Hello, everyone. We'll give folks a little bit of time to go ahead and get logged in and get comfortable. So let's go ahead and kick it off with an icebreaker question today. So what is everyone's favorite movie? Let's go ahead and start with Kristen.
I feel like mine is is too easy because I have all of it behind me. I like Back to the Future. I'm a small fan of it. I would say though, Back to the second Back to the Future is my favorite. If I had to pick a specific one.
Awesome. Well, I'm sure we have some more follow-up questions for you, but let's get everyone really quickly. Trevor, what's your favorite movie?
I'd have to say Blazing Saddles. I'm still waiting to screen it for my teenager, so not sure. Wait a couple more years, maybe. I'm not sure.
Never too early to start with Mel Brooks.
I think so.
Awesome. And Michelle, how about you? What's your favorite movie?
I would say The Notebook. It's kind of cheesy, but it's a movie that I can sit and watch. I can't really sit and watch movies because very little attention span, but The Notebook gets me.
I totally get the very little attention span with movies. And David, how about you? What's your favorite movie?
I'm going to have to do a split decision here. I like humor and maybe drama, so I'm going to go Caddyshack for sure. And then A River Runs Through It, so I can laugh and cry at the same time.
Oh, you guys. And Dustin, how about you? What's your favorite movie?
Oh, I love the laugh and cry. I also have two little kids, and so I adopted the movie Coco. It was a Disney Pixar film as my favorite because the visuals and the music, but like the feels. If you're about family and something that you can watch and repeat with kids. It's weird to say it that a child's movie is my favorite, but it is.
So good, though. And I would have to say my favorite movie right now, I really like Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Have you guys had a chance to see that movie? It's so, so good. I think it might still be showing in a few places, but it is such an amazing film. You'll laugh and cry for sure. It's a little bit long, Michelle, so just go into it knowing that. But if you're into The Notebook, you'll probably still really like it. It's got a lot of great feels to it. And another favorite movie of mine forever is always going to be 300. Something about it is just so great. The action, the story. Yeah, it's awesome. And Kristen, I know everybody is dying to know what's the story behind the hoverboard you got there.
I was saying I had to think of a more exciting story about this. It's not that exciting, but so I have the Nike mags, which I should have lit up for this event. Now I'm thinking about it, I totally missed the opportunity, and I had the hoverboard. So the Nike mags were part of the Michael J. Fox Foundation's auction with Nike, and I was but a young sales rep at the time who spent too much of their commission check on those shoes during that auction. And I did justify it because it was a charitable donation, technically, at least some part of it was. And then the hoverboard, Mattel actually partnered with Zemeckis and Bob Gale to make a limited run of recreations of it. It makes sounds, which I would share for another time if anybody wants to hear.
Oh, how fun.
But it's actually Mattel, and so it came in this beautiful box from Mattel. Looks just like a toy you would have bought off of, at the shelf. I had like the boy and the girl options on it with the different colors and all that kind of stuff. So anyways, that's the story. Not too exciting, but they're not like fan made. They're authentic.
They're authentic.
Yeah.
That is exciting, not boring at all. I'm going to have to get you on a panel again so that way we can hear the sounds next time.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, we'll just do a Back to the Future panel and I can chat about all that.
And hello again, everybody in the audience joining us, and welcome to the third day of Sales Reimagined, our 3-day Revenue Excellence Summit. Today's event is brought to you by the team at Modern Sales Pros. And for those of you not familiar with Modern Sales Pros, it's the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, and sales enablement, aka our Modern Sales Pros. Our mission is to create an environment for our members to answer the toughest revenue questions out there. No need to reinvent the wheel yourself. We got you covered. If you're not a member yet, you'll be invited to join after the summit, and I hope that you will. And this summit would not be possible without our amazing sponsors that you see here on this slide. Kudos to them for making this happen. These amazing orgs are not only sponsoring this specific event you're about to see, but the full 3 days and 17 total events of this summit. To learn more about these innovative companies, go ahead and click on the Sponsor Booths tab at the top of this event page and check out all the amazing, ungated, valuable resources that our sponsors have made available just for us this week. There might also be some fun surprises and giveaways in those booths, so definitely check them out. And this week's summit will be full of ways to completely reimagine sales. Whether you're in sales, marketing, customer success, or product, there will definitely be content for you. If you want to see what we've got going on the rest of the day, go ahead and visit the agenda tab at the top of this event page to see our full schedule of events. And for this session, here's our agenda. I'll go over some housekeeping notes really quickly. The speakers will do a brief introduction of themselves and tell you what makes them so awesome. And then we'll dive right into the content. We'll have some time for live Q&A, and then we'll wrap with some key takeaways towards the end. And audience, we also love when you participate, so please don't be shy. Go ahead and start blowing up the chat and the Q&A section, and our experts will be sure to hit as many questions as we can today. But before we dive into the content, let's go over some quick housekeeping notes. First of all, this event is being recorded. You'll be able to access this recording as well as the key takeaways on the summit page of the MSP website following the event. And second, familiarize yourself with Goldcast. If you have a question for our speakers, please use the Q&A function on the right side of your screen so we can get them answered live. Also, the chat is wide open, like I said, so please do interact with each other. Feel free to drop in your LinkedIn and what did you think about, like the last point that was made? Let us know. We're dying to know. And lastly, go ahead and check out all of the amazing speakers and sponsors by navigating to the tabs at the top of your screen. That was a lot. And let's go ahead and get started now. The one and only David will be our moderator for this morning's panel. So David, go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, thank you very much, Roxy. One and only, I think everyone knows at least 10 David, so I'm not sure if that's actually true, but thank you.
One and only on this panel.
There we go. That works. That works. So, well, thank you all and welcome to the panel today. I want to say thank you to MSP for having us join. It's hard to find a community where people are actually there to help each other and learn from instead of trying to sell you their product. And I think MSP does a good job of moderating that out. So, so thank you for having us. So without further ado, I'm going to let the fine folks in this panel introduce themselves. We'll start off with, we're going to move around actually on the slide a little bit just to mix things up. So Michelle, we're going to start with you, if you don't mind introducing yourself to the community out here.
Yes, thanks. I'm Michelle Peach. I'm VP of Revenue at Dooley. I have 10 plus years of sales management experience, more specifically building out sales teams from the ground up at early stage startups.
Great. Thank you very much, Michelle. Trevor, let's roll to you. Trevor, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, good afternoon. Trevor Childers. I head up enterprise sales here at Captivate IQ. I've been in software sales in one capacity or another for about the last 20 years, running teams at different software companies, carrying a bag, running demos as a solutions architect. So I've seen all angles of this. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Thank you, Trevor. All right, Kristen, back to you and the hoverboard. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Kristen Hayback. I'm president and COO at Shogun. I have also been doing this for probably longer than I should actively state for fear of you figuring out my age. But I've come from a sales background from the very beginning, and I was VP of sales at Trello. I was the head of enterprise sales for Americas and APAC at Atlassian, and I built out an international team at Atlassian in my final kind of year and a half there as well. And I really kind of try to specialize around product-led growth and the intersection of PLG and enterprise. So if anybody ever wants to talk about those things, more than happy to chat. And if you like the sound of my voice and you think I'm interesting, I also have a podcast with two of my fellow former Trello people, our head of marketing and our head of enterprise product, which you can find on my LinkedIn if you want to check it out.
Great. Thank you, Kristen. I think we're going to have to all go find this podcast now. So.
That's a free podcast advertising. That's why I'm here.
Good plug. Good plug. Great. And Dustin, tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell the world who you are.
Sure. Well, I love talking about product-led growth because as head of go-to-market for Compass, which is the largest real estate brokerage in the United States, we have to just understand what our platform does for our customers. And our customers happen to be real estate agents, and the best ones at that. So if you want to talk about shameless plugs, there you go. But I come from always straddling the line of something having to do with revenue. I like to say that I'm a reformed marketing person, and I business development in the channel. And what I love about go to market and what I used to do in channel is traveling around, making sure that the reps know the material, they can deliver it, and they're always involved in the roadmap. So excited to be here. Really excited to learn from the other panelists. And actually, Dave, I want to hear more about your background.
It's a nice segue, Dustin. It's like you've done this before. So a little background on myself. My name is David Gardner, Regional Vice President of Sales at Signified. I run our NORAM and APAC regions. Been here for about 3 years. Signified, from a high level, we work with e-commerce brands or organizations or retailers in general, and that industry segmentation has grown exponentially over the last couple of years. Crypto, there's a lot of interesting new verticals popping up in this world that we work with, but we primarily help organizations with revenue optimization, eliminating fraud through their e-commerce channels, and pure automation. There's a lot more that we do, but from a high level, that's what we do here at Signified, and really looking forward to chatting with everyone today. So from a panel, I'm really excited about this panel, as I think there's a lot of folks that come into an organization and they're not really sure how to get their go-to-market teams rolling. They're not sure maybe where they should spend their time. They may not have the tips and tricks that they feel they need, and maybe even a little imposter syndrome. So I find that this is a really interesting panel. It's called Adding Fuel to Your Fire. And it's the playbook to empowering your sales managers. So really excited about the conversation today. We've had a chance to kind of meet backstage probably twice now and get a chance to hear a little bit about each other and these particular topics today. So without further ado, our first question or topic of the day is going to be, what are your favorite metrics and tools to foster sales management empowerment? So I think we all have our certain metrics we like to look at. We have a slew of tools that we can choose from, especially over our career. But let's get into the nitty gritty. So Trevor, let's start with you. Trevor, why don't you share a little bit about your favorite metrics and the tools you use?
Sure. I'm a bit of a data nerd, so I am the guy that tends to model all of these things out in spreadsheets to the nth degree. So the way that I have modeled these out from one place to another is always in the form of sort of a machine, a sales machine, from top of funnel to bottom of funnel, the conversion rate, the velocity, understanding the quota coverage. And so from a top level view, I always try to look at just the ins and outs without getting caught up in the minutia. You can look at a sales forecast, you can get a report in Salesforce and feel perfectly fine. Like, oh, that's a really long list. I think we're going to be okay. But really taking that gut feeling and putting it into the model to make sure you know, like, all right, we've got this number of deals in this stage. We know the velocity is this. How much coverage do we have for the queues coming ahead, for the months coming ahead? Do we have enough coming in from our BDR and our marketing organization? So I like to model it out, look at that machine function, because that kind of works in my head, so that I can stay ahead by at least a couple of quarters to go back and say, look, we're going to be in trouble for Q4 when we're in Q2, or next year we need to do something. We're going to blow it out in Q4. So that's the way that I view things from a metrics perspective. Not typically getting down as much into the rep level detail, because I like to let them run their own businesses and not micromanage. But if I can come up from the top, it tends to get me out of trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you brought up an interesting point, which is coverage. And that's something I think maybe folks that are new into sales management is something that may not necessarily be something top of mind for them. They're so focused on pipeline in general in bookings, they forget about coverage being a very important part of how you get to that bookings number. So Interesting point, Trevor. So, Michelle, we're going to kick the same question over to you. So, what are some of your favorite metrics or tools that you like to use to foster sales management empowerment? Or do you have any additional thoughts on anything Trevor had to say?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm very similar to Trevor, where I spend a lot of time looking at the data, but I'm more specifically focused on my leaders digging a little bit deeper. So like you mentioned, we have a pipeline that's massive, right? It looks like we're going to crush our goals, but let's take a look at the close rate on the pipeline, the stages that it's at. And then I encourage them to actually dig deeper, the sources. Do you know that that source is actually a higher close rate compared to, webinar leads, or looking deeper into the actual activity that is driving the pipeline, the lead source, and do we have enough that's driving it? So then we could predict our forecast for the future. It's great to say super high level that, okay, well, the team sent X amount of emails this week. What does that mean? That means nothing to me. What do you expect from that? So take the time to dig a little bit deeper. But from a tool perspective in coaching, I really encourage them to actually listen to the calls. So get in Gong, listen to the calls so they can better understand all of that pipeline that was just generated. Take a look at the discovery, the next steps. Do they have next steps? So empowering them to get on their reps level as well to provide them better coaching opportunities.
Yeah, the listening to call element, right? There's a lot more than just metrics, and there's so much value into listening to the calls, whether you're listening to somebody else's call or, more importantly, your own call. So excellent point. Kristen, let's flip it over to you. Your thoughts on favorite metrics and tools.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what everyone has said. And so in an effort not to repeat it, I'll pick some other things. One of the things that I have been doing a lot recently is kind of thinking about how do you get exposure to different KPIs in a way where, if you look at the same thing every single Monday or every single, week, whatever it might be, sometimes you start to glaze over on what those things are. And so thinking about initiatives around improving performance and kind of sprints, right? Like, hey, we're going to have a top of the funnel sprint. We're going to have a conversion sprint. We're going to have whatever it is. And it's not that you don't look at those other criteria, but for that period of time, you put a heavy emphasis on this one piece. And so I like to use Slack for that, and to have kind of like we have this movers, losers, closers kind of like channel where we talk about like these are the deals that moved. These are the deals that closed. These are the deals that we, lost, whatever it is. And making sure that a different thing is highlighted every week in there, in addition to whatever the other metrics are. So it's like, hey, have you looked at this? We haven't looked at this thing for a while. And it just keeps everybody a little bit on their toes. Because I think sometimes with metrics, you can get into autopilot to some extent. And you can get into the minutia, like you guys were talking about, where it doesn't actually mean anything anymore. It almost loses its meaning. And so this is more, I think, especially for frontline managers and for reps, where it's like to keep them focused on something. It's kind of like gamifying it so that it's always a little bit different. And it's like not always looking at the game tape for the exact same thing, right? Looking at the game tape, listening to the call, whatever it is, for specific things each time, which means maybe you don't capture everything, but it usually means you're listening with a lot more intent, or you're analyzing with a lot more intent at the time.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kristen. Yeah, I think it's really easy to hit the snooze button sometimes if you don't shake it up a little bit. So kind of changing around some of the metrics that you're looking at, still having your foundation that you're managing your business to, but keeping folks on their toes. I like it. So for this first question, we're going to get everyone involved, and then for the sake of time, we're gonna move some folks around. So Dustin, what are your thoughts? Favorite metrics, tools you use to foster your sales team?
So I'll take a little bit of different approach, because I think that we can't ever get away from things like quota attainment and close rate and deal cycle time. And those are going to be forever something that we look at. I have the pleasure currently of working with an amazing sales operations team and a CRO, and that looks at all of that. So one of the things that I've been digging into more recently is I don't really care about activity from a rep level as much as I do as the outcome from those activities. So what we've tried to build, and we're just about finished, is pulling in signal from every one of our tools that our team uses and putting it next to each other. And on one side, you see quote attainment and those things we always track to try to drive correlation between certain tools and activities. And I think I just heard a sports analogy. I happen to, for some reason, I'm a dark mind, use a lot of war comparisons, and like you just want to get in there and be able to replicate the super soldier. And by taking a best practice from here and best practice from here, we can do that. We can help frontline managers if they need to go down that road. They can do that. The last thing on that is we can find out if a tool is just not working, and we have to train it better, we have to enable it better, or we have to get rid of it and save that money. So driving correlation between all of the metrics and the tool usage is what I'm focused on right now.
Yeah, the idea of looking at the tools and potentially moving tools out is a novel concept. I think is technology professionals like we are, it's really easy to amass tools, and then you look back and you're like, I have 3 things that do the same thing, or does anyone even use this anymore? So being able to stay on top of that is so important. So excellent. All right. So next question, we're going to consolidate for the sake of time so we get through all questions. This next question is, how does your playbook instill trust but verify mindset across your org? Michelle, I'm going to come to you first. Why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to provide visibility into what data and metrics you're going to report on weekly, monthly, and quarterly, but also explain the why. So the team always wants to know, why does close rate matter, right? Or something along those lines. And I think it's important for them to understand why we measure that, but also how they impact it. And I'm also a firm believer of their own sales math. So everyone's different. Everyone sells differently. And I don't mandate specific metrics on a daily or weekly basis because everyone manages their time their own way, but they need to hit their specific pipeline goals. So providing them insight into how to do that, and also allowing them to come up with their own way to build their own pipeline or get the demos that they need to, in which we call your own sales math. And then we report on that on a weekly and monthly basis. And we also are very transparent with the entire organization and show them every metric that we look at on the sales side.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michelle. I'm trying to think through our conversation before, and I think following up on what you shared, Kristen, I think you have I guess maybe a little correlation from our conversations to Michelle's feedback. I would love to hear your thoughts on this topic as well.
Yeah, I think that, I agree with all of that, right? And no one's math is the same, right? You'll have some people that have a crazy high close rate and other people that don't, but still can hit their numbers. So it takes them a little bit longer, a little bit shorter. And so, yeah, the concept of teaching people, right? You teach a person how to fish, you teach a person how to know if they're going to hit their numbers, is super critical. For me, I think that consistency is also really key. I think that I was talking to an early stage leader the other day, and we were talking about just the fact that the team didn't have good visibility into, like, not just the team that was doing it, but the exec team as well. If the numbers were going to get hit, or where things were at, or where, weaknesses or softness might be. And so for me, having like a standing weekly call that has the team on it, but also has exec sponsorship on it as well, where you're basically kind of at a weekly level saying, like, hey, red, yellow, green, like, we're looking good, we're not, we have pipeline coverage, we don't, we have velocity to it, we don't. It brings an awareness constantly so that if you need to be making pivots. But 2, there's also a real trust but verify aspect to there, which is like, you as a rep have your pipeline clean, right? It's accurate, right? Because I'm about to sit here with the CEO and with other people, and like, I'm going to say your name and what the number is next to it. Like, and I don't have to necessarily be the one going through each and individual deal for that, but I think any rep would want to make sure that their stuff was as accurate as possible. They're good or bad, right? Like, don't sandbag it. There's a level, like, accuracy is going to be key. And that's what we're striving for. If you're going to miss your number, it's better for me to know ahead of time that you're going to miss your number, so we can talk about it. If you're going to blow out your number, it's also helpful for me to know ahead of time that you're going to blow out your number, and that be a part of the conversation on a really regular basis. And it was something that Atlassian really, taught in me, which was that level of like, if you blew out your number, but we didn't know you were going to blow out your number, or if you missed your number and we didn't know it, like, that's worse. Like, that's worse than anything else that could possibly happen. Like, it's worse to blow out your number and be surprised by it than it is to just hit your number accurately, which is a really interesting mindset, I think, for salespeople. But it is that trust but verify. It means that, like, you weren't putting your stuff in correctly. You weren't making your calls accurately. And, like, how do I trust your numbers if that's the state that we're in?
Yeah, Kristen, that's it's a topic I think almost weekly at my organization and with account executives. And maybe it's something that's a bad habit that's been built into folks through time, where there's this fear of missing their number, which there should be a healthy dose of that. But you don't want to tell your sales leader that this is what I'm going to do, and very well you're going to be way off that high, usually low or high, right? You need to know your business, and it's so important that the individuals individual contributors understand accuracy is so key, especially as trying to predict your business and have predictability. The board doesn't like when you wildly have swings up and down, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think that, as we talk about things like fundraising in this environment and stuff like that, especially in growth stage companies, this could impact how you report your burnout. This could impact how you think about your hiring plans. This could impact a ton of stuff more than just like the high five you get if you blew your number out or not, And I think maybe the emphasis hasn't been there before, but it's certainly shifting there, I think, now as well. And so it's about, not to tangent, but it's about so much more than the numbers, because the numbers for an individual rep are driving the money, the cash flow for the business. And there's going to be an increasing scrutiny, I think, for accuracy across the board with the kind of macroeconomic state that we're in.
Yeah.
I think it's super important to walk them through that, because they're so far removed. But when you start to show them why it matters to accurately forecast your business, why it matters to log all of your activity, it impacts everything all the way up to the board. And not a lot of reps and sales leaders think that way.
Yeah, Michelle, I was just going to tag you in because of the why, right? So an example is, if you are going to sandbag or you don't predict your business well, and your team closes a handful of deals the business isn't expecting, you may not have the implementation or CS support on the backside. And then you complain that your deal churned out or your customer's unhappy. And part of that leads to the AE accurately forecasting their business. That's the why, one of the reasons, right? So right, spot on. Excellent. So next question, Dustin, I really think this is right up your alley. So the next question is, what are your tips and tricks on using data to inspire and empower your team? So let's start there. I know you love the sales ops side of the house. You're kind of a master of all trades. Talk to us a little bit about your tips and tricks.
Yeah, I think there's a fair amount of this answer that could go back to the why and transparency and clarity from the last question. So thanks, Michelle and Kristen. We've got, again, no shortage of data, right? So I think the best thing that you can do when you're trying to create accountability, and I've seen it done in a few different ways at different organizations, but it's being consistent with the delivery. And so I love Kristen's sprint idea, because that then becomes also consistent. We're going to focus on this, right? But if you're consistent in the delivery and the messaging of what you're going after, what you're looking at, and actually what matters to the business right now, I think that's really important. So things like a weekly, we have a weekly roundup email that goes to frontline managers, and it clearly shows all of the key metrics and how everybody's doing and how we're pacing. And so that's something that becomes expected, to start the week with a look back and a look ahead. I think the other thing is getting that instilled at the local level. So when those frontline managers do a version of that in their stand-ups and or stand-downs, everybody is kind of in the same mindset about the accountability and what we're all driving together. So I think consistency and transparency on what we're delivering, you have to start there.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much, Dustin. So we're doing pretty decent on time. So I think we need to get more folks involved because I think this is a really interesting topic. And I think there's a lot of people here that care about this one as well. Trevor, I'm going to kick it over to you. Tell us a little bit about your tips and tricks on using data and maybe how do you create accountability with that data?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I do just foremost as a team when we're building teams, and I don't think when in software sales especially, we don't put enough time into the actual team building itself. We got a whole bunch of, not to use a sports analogy because I'm passionately disinterested in sports, but we got a whole bunch of quarterbacks and everyone's running and trying to score at the same time. And that's not really how a team should work. So from the individual frontline team to the second line managers on up, create a team where everyone has roles and responsibilities for the team itself. Everyone does things differently, as we talked about in the previous question. No two reps are going to do things the same way. So everyone's going to have strengths and weaknesses. So finding those superpowers that every rep has and making them responsible for the team, for managing that part of their superpower to the team. So I always like to say, I don't want to generate the long line to the Trevor Childers customer support desk. You know, if I'm on PTO this week, you know, the team runs by itself. Those meetings still happen. Those things are still happening. I'm there to, you know, conduct the orchestra, but I'm not playing the instruments. And that's important to build in the team from the ground up through all of the different levels so that it functions without you. It's not just a bunch of lone wolves. And then just going back to the data, you know, I liked what actually I think Kristen and Michelle both said the same thing, just having that data out there so that everyone's looking at it. It's not me presenting the data and like, hey, here's your report card, kid. You sucked last quarter. It's like, no, these things are out there. Everyone's looking at them. The CEO's looking at them. I'm looking at them. So they know that these things are actually being evaluated, whether or not I'm involved in it or not. And that tends to create some accountability. Going back to like things like gong calls, I'll typically pick up from any random rep in the organization. I'll watch a gong call and like shoot a Slack asking a question like, hey, I was watching this video that you didn't think anybody was going to watch. And you asked this question, what was the purpose behind doing that? And they're like, okay. So just keeping them on their toes with stuff like that, I think is pretty important.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that even ties back to the trust but verify mindset, right? They know people are inspecting here and there. That keeps their focus on, I guess, keeps them at their A game. So thank you, Trevor. Michelle, I think we're going to run through everyone on this question. We'll come back to you too, Kristen. So tips and tricks on using data, creating accountability. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I actually roll up a weekly summary to my CEO, who then sends it to our investors every single Friday. So I have my team do the same. And they roll up metrics, learnings, wins, losses, celebrations, or concerns, anything that is top of mind for them. But the idea is for them to look back at their week and see any gaps that they actually had within their week. So no demos. Why were your demos low? Or you didn't have any demos? What activity did you do to make up that gap for next week? And those are the questions that my leaders ask to dig a little bit deeper to hold them accountable. But then we report all the way up to the board. So they know that everything that they're doing in their day-to-day activities will impact pipeline, obviously, to rev. So anything that they do actually goes to our overall company goals, whether it's quarterly or yearly. So they have an understanding that they have a stake in the game as well. But it's digging deeper is really important. So if you look at a rep that absolutely crushed it, what happened? Why? Did they get more leads? What were the sources of the leads? And having the rep and manager get on that level as opposed to me drilling in so they can think bigger and how they can make it repeatable or stop doing something for that matter.
A quick question back at you, Michelle, based on your what you just shared, and I think also kind of ties to the question in the chat here, is when that information is shared out from the individual contributor level, is that amongst their peer group as well? Does everyone see that, or does that funnel directly up to just their direct manager?
Everyone sees it.
Got it. So to the question in the chat here, and this will come back to you, Michelle, most likely, is that seems like one way to maybe even share some best practices and things of that nature of how to maybe achieve maybe a better activity to demo ratio, or how to handle certain objections or things of that nature. Or it's not the manager that just has to jump in and tell somebody how to fix something. Like the team is also help coaching as well.
Exactly. So it's a team. It's basically a team sport. So right now, as I speak, my Slack is popping off because they're doing a competition of booking meetings. So what we're going to do next is walk us through how you book the meeting and best practices. So everyone can learn from that. And collaboration is key, especially in a remote environment. So if they start to see a trend of reps that are crushing it week over week, we explain why, what's working for them, what's not working. So they do that on a weekly basis on Thursdays.
Great. Thank you very much, Michelle. Hopefully that answered the question in the chat. I know we could probably spend 2 hours at least talking about that specific topic. And I think maybe we can even get to a little bit more of it as we continue our conversation, which I think dovetails nicely into our final question. Kristen, I know I said I was going to get to you on this topic. We have 10 minutes, and I think we can probably lump a lot of this all together in our final question here. So how does your playbook create a culture that effectively supports your first line managers? Kristen, I'm going to start this question off with you. What are your thoughts on a playbook to create a culture that supports your first line managers, which sometimes can be forgotten and frankly have a very tough job?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, realistically, a lot of times frontline managers are first time managers too. They're not always, but a lot of times they are. And what does that mean? It probably means they were like a really strong rep who now has been told to somehow take that skill set and transfer it into managing people, which if you think about it for a second is like kind of insane because those are two just completely different things. And so a lot of times you were like, oh, you know, John crushes his numbers and he's so great at this and this. Let's make him the sales manager and he'll somehow know how to make everybody do the exact same thing he's been able to do. And all of a sudden, you know, be responsible for these strategic decisions on the team that he's never had to think about before. And so just like how you would hopefully map out, you know, like I think Trevor was saying, like, here is the engine, here's the start of it, here's the, you know, that pipeline basically of how you run the business. That needs to happen for the frontline managers too, to really help empower them. And it's not, in my opinion, it's not just here are metrics and like, your close rate should be 20% and it's not, you're this or that. That's not enough. Like anybody can look at the numbers and know what those things are. The next thing is how do you empower that person to impact those numbers? And, you know, you have to think about, I think, again, like consistency is key. You have to say that you have to help that person understand, like, you're going to want to do daily stand-ups. Here's what a good daily stand-up looks like. If you're running SDRs, for example, you're going to need to, you know, do call coaching, make sure there's a block on your calendar every day or several times a day. Make sure you then go pull X amount of gong calls. And again, like back to the concept of not everybody manages the exact same way. Not everybody executes the exact same way. It's not like you have to listen to 3 phone calls or you've horribly failed as a frontline manager. But the idea is, you know, there is a track record of what is successful, and successful managers tend to do this. And my suggestion is that is something that you do. And hey, there will be a level of accountability because I'm going to expect that at that weekly pipeline call, you have some insights from how many calls you've listened to share with us. And so, you know, giving them the same kind of guardrails that hopefully you're also giving your reps, which I think sometimes people are really good at giving the reps those guardrails and then they just completely stop after that in terms of giving the frontline managers the same. And, you know, also working on helping them with their people skills as well as those sales skills, right? Which is listen to the phone call. Great. Now, how do you give that feedback to your person? Because if you go in and you say, hey, you sucked, you asked a bunch of stupid closed-ended questions, you know, it's probably not going to go super well for them. And so it's just like how you would role play with a rep, you kind of have to role play with a frontline manager, right? Which is you just listen to a terrible call. What do you say to me? Let's have a back and forth on it. And again, like we forget those skills, I think sometimes because we're like, well, you're a good rep. You'll be able to give feedback on a call, but that is not a given, right? And so I'm sure we all feel strongly on this. There's probably a million other things we could talk about on it, but those are some of them off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing, Kristen. Yeah, I think that's everyone has been through that, where the top producing individual contributor finds themselves in a leadership role. And I mean, sometimes maybe just a quick conversation with that person to realize, like, what are their objectives and goals and what do they care about? It very well may have nothing to do with managing people. It might be making a ton of money and continuing to close big deals, but you put them in a manager role and now they're taking over calls for individual contributors. They can't level the whole team up, and it's, it becomes a mess. So excellent feedback. Trevor, I feel like this is a hot topic for you just based on our conversation. So how does your playbook create remember, first and second line managers here, how does your playbook create a culture that effectively supports your frontline managers or first line managers?
Yeah, I think like we talked about, the best thing that you can do for your frontline managers is making sure that your second line managers know how to manage, and that there's a prescription for here's how this is going to roll up, what these roles are meant to do. Because a lot of times it's just like, I'm RVP, now I'm AVP, now I'm SVP, now I'm just all these VPs, and they all just stand in a row and poke each other in the back. Like, where's the deal? Where's the revenue? And it's that all that does is create stress and annoyance, and it never really helps to move the deals along. So if you design your organization in such a way that your second line managers are there to reveal the blind spots that the first line manager is not able to see through the fog of war, and actually help them to close the deals, refine the forecast, then you've got something. But all too often, your second line managers are just petulant children in the back seat saying, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And that doesn't do anything. I mean, all that does is just create stress and anxiety around deals that they probably forecasted out of stress and anxiety that they shouldn't have in the first place, and they're not going to close anyway. And then you've just created this sort of fictitious forecast, this theater, that at the top line, you just know, like, all right, whatever they rolled up, I need to cut in half or cut down 60% because I know it's all fiction. If you can get real with, and I think Kristen said this, like, if you're going to not get the deal closed, I want to know that. And so creating that culture within the organization so that your second line can go to your first line and, like, it's okay if this deal doesn't close. It's okay if we miss. We need to know ahead of time that we're going to miss. Accuracy over attainment. That's what's most important. Just creating that culture so that it persists through those layers is most important. And I haven't seen it very often, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, it's a when we were chatting backstage, I mean, you definitely took kind of that second line manager approach, I think, on this, and it makes a ton of sense because it's really easy to, when you get further removed from the deal, where it becomes like sometimes it's just easy to poke somebody on the back. Where's this deal? So,
yeah, all the best leaders that I've worked for are the ones that I can just go to and, like, all right, here's my forecast, and they're like, well, tell me a little bit about this deal, and I'll give them 60 seconds on the deal. Like, nah, it's not coming in. Like, what do you mean? Like, nah, like, that's their role. They can smell it. They've been doing it for a long time.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Trevor. Dustin, we're going to kick it over to you, and then Michelle will come back to you. Obviously, other folks can chime in as well.
Yeah, real quick, I think one of the things that I've seen, and we actually realize where I am right now, is the same thing that Kristen and everybody else said. Is we've got top performers that come in and they're like, this is the first time. So we actually looked at it like this. We pulled somebody, an industry pro of sales and leadership consulting, and hired them to be an internal consultant and program manager to up-level these first-time managers. And it wasn't only adding a formal onboarding program for these people. It starts before that, which this I love. There's an application process to join this leadership crew. And you have to go through interviews internally, you have to get accepted, and then you have to do all of the curriculum over, I think it's a 6 to 9 month program, before you have the even eligibility to do that. So we're starting before they get in seat. It's in addition to them being an amazing rep, we are getting them ready and for day one. And then the other big shift for us, and we'll kick it over, is when building programs and spiffs and sprints and all of these different training programs for the reps, you have to put together a guide and or training materials for the leaders so they understand what's going on and they can also help support it. So there's a lot of focus we have on this. I love the frontline manager, and we have to do more for them.
Yeah, great point, Dustin. Michelle, what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, to piggyback off of the guide, I put together a day in the life. It's a grid that walks the leaders through a percentage of time that they should be spending every single week on certain tasks. So about 40% is performance metrics and data that they're drilling into on the rep level, and 35% is forecast. Then I also have them do that for their account executives. So at any given point, they're lost or they don't know where to go, or they think that they're like checked off all the boxes. There's a guide for them to go look at that outlines all of the reports and dashboards that they should be looking at. Best practice recommendations on coaching. So they have some type of guidance in front of them if I'm not around or if they don't know what to do. And as a frontline manager, first time more specifically, they just think it's like, oh, one-on-ones and pipeline reviews, but there's a lot more that goes into it.
Absolutely. I know one of the questions in the chat here is around playbooks. I think there's a variety of different playbooks you may have. There's not necessarily one playbook, right? There's playbooks on how to potentially manage your first line managers, your second line managers, how to ramp people correctly, how to effectively run a campaign. There's so many different types of playbooks that we have. So knowing that we have about 14 minutes here left, I think Roxy's going to come in and tell us that we're winding down. I think we turn to some of the questions in the chat. And let's start with, looks like John Mendoza has a question in here. And Angelica, if you don't mind putting in the chat, if your question was answered from a high level or not, and then we can circle back to your question as well. But John's question is, what are the key deal attributes that you pay attention to when it comes to forecasting? Quantitative, qualitative. So I'll open it up to the team. Anyone have any thoughts there?
I can kick off. The deals that we typically go after are large deals, right? And so we have the benefit of knowing that there are no opportunistic purchases when they're spending hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year on software. So the real easy question I ask is, are these guys buying software? It's really simple, because if they're not in the market for buying software, we'll catch them next year. But it's amazing how often they're like, well, but like this, they really need it. I'm like, I don't care if they need it. Are they buying it? Like if it's not an actual project, it's not in the forecast. We'll kill it. And those that are smaller, asking the question like, are you they're buying software in July? Do they know they're buying software in July? Let's lead that. We can go through MedPick and everything else, but let's start with some basics.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. Yeah, like properly understanding the buying cycle for your customer is important, right? There's probably plenty of deals where your rep is forecasting a deal and there's a competitor in place, and you ask them, when's the contract up? They're like, I'm not really sure.
Why not?
This is a very interesting question. So I'm gonna keep the table or the round table going. So key deal attributes that you pay attention to when it comes to forecasting. Kristen, thoughts? What do you think?
I'll take the chicken answer, and I'll say both are important. I think ultimately, I think that concept of, I can hear your deal in 30 seconds and generally know if it's going to happen or not. There is a level of that's like that can't be quantitative, right? Or I guess quantitative is the measurable one, right? So, you kind of need to hear what the conversation has been a little bit, like what the tone of it, how it's going. And that's where you can really start to pick it up, right? Because they can hit all the right marks from, hey, it's moving. It's not longer than our normal sales cycle. It's about the same size. Sounds like this, sounds like that. Like the numbers can all look right. And then you hear what the story is and you're like, nah, I'm going to tell you right now, this isn't going to happen. And so I think it's like a macro and micro thing, right? When you're looking at the numbers holistically, it tends to be like, if I'm looking at the whole of the pipeline, it goes back to everything being very measurable. And normally the numbers come out in the wash. But when you're with an individual rep and you're talking about their individual pipeline, yeah, the story of what's going on in a lot of ways is just important, right? Like if you know that they're in a space, for example, that's having some layoffs, and you can kind of chat through that. You can be like, so, asking a little bit about the environment that they're in, you might be like, yeah, this is also probably not going to happen. And so sometimes the numbers just can't tell you those things. Sometimes it needs to be bigger than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's really about having the conversation and digging deeper. So, for example, when a rep says they're going to be making a decision on July 14th and it's in commit, well, decision on July 14th isn't the same as signing, And for me, I just drill into who are you talking to. The titles will give me an indication of how much more work needs to be done to get this deal in, because we know who the typical decision maker is and the signer is in our deals. And just drilling them with the basic questions of pain, value, titles, decision-making process, the standard medic, but I know within a few seconds of the responses whether it's going to happen or not. It just depends on your sales cycle and overall process.
Yeah, absolutely. Dustin, you have some thoughts here?
Yeah, just a couple. I think that's one of the beauties of having frontline managers that have these deal reviews and these conversations about every deal, and they're able to red-green forecast their gut check. And why I love taking top reps is they know faster than anybody if this is a real deal or not. And so just +1 to having the actual conversation, because you can hear pretty quickly if this deal is going to be squirrely in a day or two, or if it's real. And so qualitative for me, because it all funnels into strength and the call. When you have the right people making the calls, you can start to trust that after a while.
David, I'd pile on there a little bit with it seems like everyone's got the sniff test, right? The qualitative aspect of things, because we've been doing this for a while. I think the quantitative side of things is when it comes to forecasting the date. I forget who said it was like, all right, hey, the decisions at Michelle, like the decision's on the 14th, so they're going to sign on the 15th. Like, no, they're not. Are we in legal? Is there steer co? What onboarding system do they have? What do they need a PO? Like, how long does this take? Who's doing it? Where are they? Are they in Aspen? Like, being able to get that timeline together. It's usually 60 days later, by the way, for large deals. But that's, I think, the quantitative side of things, that when's it actually going to sign.
Yeah, and I'm gonna jump in here too, because I'm very passionate about this question as well. And I do think there's very important things that were just mentioned. Like when you talk to a rep, so Michelle, Trevor, what you just mentioned, like the decisions gets made on this date and it doesn't happen. It's like, tell me about your paper process. What's the paper process looks like? All those things that you just mentioned, Trevor. And they're like, oh, I mean, we send over the contract and then it gets signed. Like, do they have legal counsel? Is it internal? Is it external? Do you know why that even matters? Are the people on vacation that have to sign? I don't know. I'm not sure. But from like actually tracking from a forecast standpoint, using like metrics and numbers, things that I like to look at are time and stage. Like if we see deals of this size in this industry typically move between these stages at this number of days, and this one's wildly off, I'm starting the sniff test, right? The metrics help lead to the sniff test. Like something seems off here. Like our average sales cycle is 168 days. This is 420 days, and like now you're forecasting it like and then in addition to that is really kind of having, I think, using numbers once again is like, has that deal been around for a long time? How many times is it pushed? This deal's pushed one, never? Okay, I have maybe a little faith here. Everything looks good using Medic and such, and like everything looks good. This deal pushed 4 times. I'm losing some of the confidence. I'm losing, frankly, most of my confidence in this deal at that point. So there's a lot of metrics as well that kind of allow you to go to the sniff test as well.
It'd be great to have that in Salesforce record to show like, oh, this is like a 5-time push. You're like, all right, this one's going to the penalty box.
Yeah. I mean, I like Clary because it tells me a lot of those scenarios too. Yeah. Now, granted, if you have a great sales ops team, they can build that in Salesforce too. But Clary is beautiful at that. Let's see.
Hello
Yeah,
again, everyone. That was awesome. It was so hard to hop back in there. I didn't want to interrupt you guys. But yeah, that was really great. And just to close things out here, if I could just get a short tweetable quote from each of you guys, just kind of summarizing one key takeaway that you really want the audience to come away from today, just to give them an essence of what y'all discussed. So Trevor, if you want to go first.
Tweetable quote. Say we're building sales reps, not robots. I like that one.
That's a good one. Awesome. Michelle, how about you?
Hire sales ops early.
I hear that one. And Kristen, how about you?
Oh, man, I should have prepped better for this. I guess it goes with hire a sales ops early, which is get data driven fast, stay data driven.
Stay data driven for sure. Dustin, how about you?
How about if you're not building dedicated programs for your frontline managers, you're missing the mark.
Deep. And David, how about you to close us out?
I'd say know the stories behind the metrics.
Nice. All right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, guys. We really appreciate all the panelists coming on and speaking today. David, Trevor, Michelle, Dustin, Kristen, you guys are so wonderful. And for those of you tuning in, be sure to stick around. We have some more amazing events going on later today. And this evening, hopefully we'll see some of y'all folks in the NYC area, Austin, and here in SF. I'll be at the salon and happy hour tonight. So hopefully I'll see some of you guys there, some of you MSP numbers. And next up, we'll have our fireside chat with John McMahon, author of The Qualified Sales Leader, going live just a few minutes after this. So go ahead and copy the link that I'm putting in the chat right now and send it to your whole team and join in on this top-notch sales education. And once again, thank you so much, guys, and I'll see you panelists backstage.